Well, good morning, and it's lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you, and thanks for the invitation to do this. It sounds like an interesting course that you're taking with my good colleague, Professor Osborn.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I've never had a class that delves into popular music,
Hmm.
especially like within all my years of school. So it's like it's super exciting for me, and then getting the project to actually go out and speak to people is even more exciting than just like read on your own, because then you get a little bit more insight.
It's
So
a great idea. Yeah.
it's
Conversation.
yeah. So, one of the first questions I wanted to ask you was, what inspired you to begin your research into metal music? Were you already a fan? Was it newer? Do you teach it to your students? Things like that?
Yes. Well, I do have a PhD student right now working on a metal dissertation. So I do teach it to my students, and I developed a course in the early 2000s that I called the Sound of Rock. And I didn't really want to do a cultural history of rock. I wanted to do the history of rock through its sounds, its sonic, creative elements. And when I created that course, I decided I would follow um, genres up from their roots to the present. So I kept um, building a history of punk and building a history of metal, and then you get into all the fracturing of the subgenres and the different kinds of sounds that emerge from all of those different subgenres. So I've always had that kind of interest in the topic from an academic point of view, but as a teenager, I grew up listening to Pink Floyd and King Crimson and Genesis and Black Sabbath and the Stones and that music from the 60s and 70s. And so that was on my turntable as much as the classical music that I was studying in my professional training. So I guess I've always had a rather eclectic interest in music. I would listen to Stravinsky, and I would listen to Pink Floyd, and I would listen to Barry White, and I would listen to all these different sounds. So consequently, if I do a retrospective on my career, I have written on a lot of different genres, and I think that would be true of your professor, Brad Osborne, as well. And this comes from a kind of freedom that we have when we're music theorists. We're thinking about theories and frameworks and analytic interests, and we reach for the music that is speaking to us in terms of that analytic framework and that perspective that we want to adopt. So I've written about country, I've written about hip hop, I've written about pop and rock and the blues and jazz. I've written about a lot of different genres, and I don't feel like I'm stuck anywhere. I feel like I have that liberty to choose, but I must say that I have for the past, it's been over a decade that I've really situated myself in progressive rock and metal. And these are genres that require an investment of time and energy. It's important to create for yourself a huge corpus of music that you listen to, that you follow. So it's a body of work that takes a bit of time to grasp and to create a really good familiarity with. So yeah, for over a decade, I've just been going to metal shows and progressive rock and metal, basically, and that's been my focus. But who knows? In a next project, maybe I'll shift again. I don't feel like we ever have to be firmly placed in one musical genre.
Hmm, that's so cool because it's just like I'm used to taking classes, and it's specifically, the canon of the specific classical composers. So really getting the opportunity to hear from people and listen and analyze music that I don't normally get to look at in the classroom is great. Like when I saw um, your article in the class that we went over that discussed Ginger, it was very exciting because I already knew who they were, and it had this moment of we can talk about other music that I like to listen to in school, and it was just like
That's great.
eye-opening. Yeah, it was so cool and exciting. Oh my gosh. And then I guess that leads into my second question was I was aware of ginger before we discussed it in class in your article. Um, what made you want to research ginger in particular, and how did they stand out to you?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, it's nice to hear that you came to find Ginger as well. And one of the ways we often find bands now is in YouTube, in just looking for certain styles of music or things pop up as well in your feed, right? If you're looking at a lot of different things. So I think I came to them through the video for I Speak Astronomy. I think that might have been, or maybe the Pisces video. I'm not sure, but one of them came up and I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And for me, because I was doing a kind of consideration of female vocalists in metal, so I needed to be gathering a wide span of artists, and I was struck by her vocal techniques. She can shift from a fairly confident, clean vocal belt and sort of sultry vocal delivery. She can shift on a dime to her harsh growl. So, and we see this in her live performance videos where she does single take, to demonstrate. There's the one for Judgment and Punish. Is that the name of the song? And she stands with her side to the camera, so you can see the whole mechanism of her chest and her neck, and she delivers the entire vocal for that song, shifting. So it's a single take video, and she shifts back and forth. And I was impressed by her vocal abilities, but also the band are highly technical. They're all virtuosic, very technical players, and they lean towards these complex songs and complex forms, complex storytelling. Seemed to me that she wanted to look right in the eye some of these positions that women find themselves uh, in the representations in metal music, and I felt like she was really wanting to speak and send messages about these positions that women can find themselves in metal music. She's got a nice defiant edge, but she's also got the very technical, virtuosic capacity to make it work. She's got it all. And she's a very dynamic live performer as well. So seeing her live is really something. She really commands the stage. And yeah, so I came to them along with other bands. There are other bands that are um, amazing in that regard. They do. I think they stand out. I think they are rising up in the metal scene to stand out as uh, a band to watch, a band to follow. And there are others. She's not alone in that role as a female metal vocalist. Um, Certain bands get more attention than others. She's getting a lot of attention right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also exciting because as I mentioned, I was familiar with them before. And as you mentioned the song Pisces, uh, that's the song that I found out through them. And specifically, like you said, I found out about them through YouTube because I think around the release of that song, it became for a certain group like popular reaction content to hear her normal voice, this nice, smooth, light voice, and then the switch into the harsh
Mm.
growl. And I just thought that was so exciting. Like as a vocalist myself, I can't do that. But it was
But you
just
could.
those I could figure it out, but safely.
Well,
Um,
they do like they train you how to do that safely, eh? And they all study how to do this, to use the false vocal folds and to not cause harm. And there are studies being done too on the long-standing effects of this kind of vocal treatment. So people who've been doing it for 30 years who clearly have no damage, and then also they're scoping and doing all kinds of cool things with just seeing how this is done, and how they can successfully maintain a career doing this. And you know what's so cool, if you listen carefully to someone like Ginger or other vocalists who do the harsh vocals, it's not a singular kind of expression. It's very varied. It's nuanced. It has pitch. It has melodic contour and shape, and it has different registers. You know, so there are the really tortured, high placed screams, and then there are the deeper growls and a whole range of melodic sounds that come out of this kind of expression. So um, it's not just opening up your false vocal cords and doing a kind of growl. You know, there's a lot to it, and this is fascinating. You know that this is actually a form of melodic expression as well as temporal and emotional expression. You,
that's
as a vocalist, would probably enjoy looking at all of that. And
oh,
yeah.
absolutely. That's something um I really want to delve into just because I love listening to it and then wanting to know like the pedagogy and science behind it would be the coolest thing ever to me. So
Mhm,
hopefully I can learn about
mhm,
it.
mhm.
And then on related to another question I had for you was I always get really excited when I find out about more female fronted metal bands. I've mentioned I've seen a few live that I've seen in This Moment and New Year's Day and Hailstorm. Those are all really exciting. Uh, so I wanted to know, aside from Ginger, what other bands have you taken a look at that have these female frontmen?
Yeah. So yeah, it's great that you're seeing them live. This is such an important experience because we really come to understand all that is entailed in this kind of performance. You know, how are they working on the stage? How are they relating to the band members on the stage? How does the audience react to them? What kind of energy is happening? And you know, they all work in different ways, right? All of these bands, male and female vocalists, work in very different ways. So I've seen a lot of them, but of course, I've seen way more male fronted metal bands than I have female fronted metal bands because the female vocalists occupy a tiny little fraction of the total metal scene. So I go when I can to see them, and different ones come around. I saw Nervosa a month ago, and this is a Brazilian all-female thrash band, and very technical players, uh, very energetic, very dynamic. I saw them in a really small setting, a basic hole in the wall kind of bar uh, downtown here in Ottawa, and they were larger than life. They were really commanding the space, and that was exciting to see because uh, you never know how an audience is going to react, right? If the audience has certain expectations, how they're going to react. But it was a really well supported show, so that was nice to see. Who have I written about? I've written a lot about Flor Jansen because she is one of those remarkable metal vocalists who, from the Gothic and symphonic and progressive metal uh, zone, um, where she can truly sing in an operatic style. She's got a huge versatility. She takes a lot of vocal risks. Like, if I say she belts on a high F sharp, you know what that means. It's a really risky move, but she does it. She has the ability to do it. So I've written a lot about Flora Janssen, and I've written about Alyssa White-Gluz, who is a harsh vocalist primarily, but she does do clean singing. I saw her live when she was in The Agonist, and now she's in Arch Enemy, having replaced Angela Gosso. And if you haven't seen Alyssa White-Gluz perform within the Arch Enemy band, take a look because she's a really dynamic performer. So just look up Arch Enemy and you'll come to all kinds of. They're releasing a lot of uh, fun videos. Um, so, and she's a very athletic performer, very um, dynamic, you know, physical performer, and she can do these amazing growls. When she first started, she was doing that from a more of a metalcore styling, and then Arch Enemy is melodic death metal, so she just put herself right in there and has succeeded quite well with that band. I've written about Annika von Giersbergen. I think you would love her voice. So if you don't know her, look up The Gathering. And The Gathering were really one of the first uh, uh, sort of gothic doom bands to feature a female metal vocalist. So Annika is often cited as one of the really influential gothic metal singers. Gothic, it just doesn't do justice. So I say that with a kind of rolling of the eyes. It doesn't really do justice to what they do. But the Gathering grew out of a kind of death doom style, and Annika came in as their second vocalist, and and she cut through. Her voice can cut through the textures of this very heavy, doomy sounding texture, and it fits in the space in just a gorgeous way. You'll just hear how when you listen to go to the album that's called Mandillion, which is the first album that featured her from 1995, and have a listen to the way that her voice shapes the music. You can tell that there's a bit of her driving the song. She's not just following, she's not just doing what they told her to do. She is pushing the direction of the music. She fits into it in a really remarkable way, kind of in between the doomy sounding, heavy guitars, and the distortion that comes out of them sits kind of above her. So she's framed by the distortion that results from the guitars in around the 6K, 6,000 hertz level, and then the really deep guitars, and she just fits in this pocket. And you hear, um, yeah, you can hear how she's driving that. So I've written quite a bit about her, love her work. And I've written also about Cami Gilbert. She's one of my favorites. So Cami Gilbert, and they're not too far from you. So it's a Texas band called Oceans of Slumber. And she's a black female vocalist in the field of metal. That's not the most common identity to find. And they are adopting they began really very much in the progressive metal zone, but they're kind of moving more towards a Southern Gothic aesthetic. So she did a beautiful cover of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit that you might want to listen to. And she has the ability, again, like Annika van Giersbergen, and I think Annika would be listed by Cami Gilbert as an influence. to cut through these textures, like to sit, they make space too, like in the sonic design of the record, they do make space for the vocalist, but she just fits right in this sound, and she does a lot of questioning of society. So the year 2020, when um, the George Floyd incident occurred, and there was a lot of um, racial strife and discussion in the US, they did this cover of Strange Fruit, which was quite a specific and strategic thing for her to do. And they also released their album, that is their self-titled album. And she says in interview that she was deliberately um, pushing questions of oppression and race in her storytelling on that album. So I've written a nice piece on that. I could share that with you if you want. I could send you that. It's kind of a short paper. It was meant as a thought piece, so it's kind of a short paper, and you might enjoy that. So, I've also written about others. So I won't keep talking here because I know there's time to consider. But there are a lot of artists who are working in these genres and working in really not just the symphonic, ethereal female vocal supported by a metal band, but working in all of the subgenres of metal. So even like the really complex mathcore and metalcore and all of these very, very technical genres.
That's so
Yeah.
exciting. I wrote down all the people you mentioned, so after this, I'm gonna
Yeah.
go listen to them because
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
love.
could send you, I could send you names to listen to. Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. Um, so then checking on our time. Oh, we got a little bit. It's great. Um, Speaking of that, I was interested after in class we went through your article, the one about Tatiana and Ginger. In there it has this mention of singing being seen as like the feminine part of the band, often like it's assumed if like a female artist is in a band, people sometimes assume they're going to be the singer. So, how does that thought process apply when there are already so many popular bands, especially within metal, that have male vocalists? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think you've put your finger on a really important question for us to be thinking about and doing interpretation and analysis. And so when I mentioned that the female vocalist is often seen as being in an objectified position, like the torch singer singing, in the spotlight. Um, this is when I mentioned that, it was a citation of the work of Philip Auslander, who's looking at performativity in music. And I see this as a reductive way of viewing the singer. So I don't think it's, so how to put this? I'm not advocating for thinking about every singing subjectivity as being a vulnerable one or an objectified position. And I'm not saying that's always feminine. It's not always already a feminine position. Um, but he puts it that way. Philip Auslander puts it that way, that it is, it's a feminized position. So this is difficult because it's actually complicated, right? It's more complicated than that. You've got male metal vocalists who adopt very vulnerable positions as vocalists in, fronting the band. Like someone like Jonathan Davis of Korn, he's got his really unusual microphone that he, stylized microphone that he stands at. Um, and he doesn't perform an instrument. He holds onto the microphone. He sings into the microphone. He's singing about incredible stories of vulnerability and his own experience in the world, pain, loss, and other male vocalists adopt this position of vulnerability as well. So I don't think it's right to simply say, well, all the women are in a vulnerable position when they're at the microphone. I don't want to reduce it to a feminine position. Uh, Male artists can also be in that vulnerable position. But it has been the way that we have looked at uh, vocalists. So there's a kind of hegemonic way of viewing this, right? A dominant way of viewing this as a vulnerable position. And um, it's fraught because we've got this whole continuum of femininity and masculinity and all the lines in between and the non-binary positions that people can adopt. And yet there is a kind of reductive reasoning that people apply when they see someone. And you can see this in the reviews of artists. You know, they will uh, critique a singer for being, if it's a male singer who's very vulnerable, they'll critique them for being too vulnerable, you know, like don't reveal all that vulnerability. And they'll also, on the other end, critique a female singer who's very aggressive as being too aggressive, like too fierce, too monstrous. So we've got to get away from this, right? So I think one of the main things I wanted to have emerge from the Ginger study was the fact that women have access to all of the positions that are available, just as men have access to all of the positions that are available. So a female singer has access to anger, rebellion, but also to vulnerability, to fragility. And male singers have that full range. They have the access to that as well. So I think the way we want the needle to move as we expand our understanding of gender in society and culture, I think we want the needle to move in the direction of granting access, affording access, and affording freedom to express through all of these different channels, to express the monstrous, to express the vulnerable. And just harsh singing alone is not necessarily monstrous. That's the other little nuance to this that I want to show is that because there are writings about harsh vocal expression that reduce harsh voices to beasts and monsters and angry aggressive emotions, and I don't see it that way either. I think that the harsh growl can arise from deep vulnerability as well as from the emotion of anger. So I want to kind of release all of these things from reductive categories and just say what story is being told by that artist in that song. What is the range of expression that they have at their fingertips that they can, draw upon and use to tell that story? And what is that story? Let's get inside the story and see what it really is. Because on the surface, it may seem that it's aggressive or it may seem that it's too vulnerable, but we don't know until we actually do the work to get in there and really interpret that work in its full expression. So with, what are the words? What are the images we're seeing? What are the musical sounds we're hearing? Um, and maybe that's a tall order. We can't ask the public to, take apart every single song, but what we can ask the public to do is to stop reducing everything to basic categories and be aware that all of these expressive positions are available to men and to women and to non-binary uh, people, and allow them to express and tell the story that they want to tell using the tools they want to use, and not reduce it all to a specific thing just because we've associated that thing with one kind of meaning in the world. Well, I think we can ask the public to do that. I think we can liberate um, popular music consumption from from the basic level of categorizing everything, you know, quickly and rushing to interpret it instead of taking the time to interpret it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's so fascinating to me. And I'm so thankful that I got to like meet with you so to hear your thoughts on it because I already thought what was mentioned in the article was so interesting and then just what I've noticed through my own listening and what's popular at certain times and what I like to listen to. So yeah, that's just like getting insight directly from you is fantastic. And then in our last handful of minutes,
Mhm.
you briefly mentioned um this so we talked about a lot about masculinity and femininity. So I wanted to know what are your thoughts on when it comes to performing gender in music? Uh, how do you think gender nonconformity comes into it with people who aren't necessarily they don't identify as a man, they don't identify as a woman? How do you think that comes across and applies into marketability, popularity, etc.?
Mhm. Well, I think that there are a lot of really interesting artists who are non-binary and who are transgender, adopting, um, feminine positions, masculine positions in transgender uh, um, identities, and I think that success is being seen. We see the artist Ethel Cain, transgender female vocalist, doing really well on the popular scene right now, and the band Pupil Slicer is one of it's kind of like one of those names you just kind of go ouch when you hear the name, but an amazing, very technical metal band with a transgender female vocalist doing the very harsh screams and I think these bands are doing really well, and they are um, able to tell the kinds of stories. Like sometimes you can look into the lyrics of what they're trying to communicate, or the concepts and themes that they're working towards, and they're not simply handling these materials in the conventional way. There are nuances to what they are saying. They're either quite explicitly saying to the world, stop asking us to conform, or, uh, you know, Cami Gilbert explicitly says, stop being racist with her music. So they are trying to move the needle on these messages, and uh, there is a greater number of these artists than people might think, because the dominant there's sort of a dominant list that comes through in the streaming services and the different feeds that we get, but when we actually go and do the looking, assemble a list of artists who work within a band, within a particular genre, we can find so many successful and artists with integrity who are really operating within their subgenre to push the boundaries to resist. Um, I think that the world is showing readiness to receive, and I think the future is very good for these artists. Um, that's not to say it's not difficult, because I know that there are lots of barriers and constraints and frustrations. On the racial front, Cami Gilbert talks about the frustration of with her band. Even just being a black female artist at the front of a metal band, they don't get put with the right bands when they're touring. They don't get sort of combined with the right connections. Like they should be touring with Catatonia. That would be a better fit, but they don't get touring with Catatonia. They get touring with sort of other female-fronted Gothic bands and things like that. So they can be frustrated. They can have their various critiques of the industry, but they're pushing forward, and I think the world is ready. I think the industry is not always keeping up with what the actual individuals out in society want to consume. I think we're being kind of channeled more than we would want to be channeled through these services and these platforms. But I think we're getting there. That's an optimistic view. I always see the cup half full.
I think, hey, that's a fantastic way of looking at things. And seeing as it says we have less than a minute left, it's been so fantastic to get to talk to you. This topic in particular is just so interesting to me, and I hope more people continue to get interested in it. So
Yeah.
thank you so
Well,
much.
you're doing good work and happy to keep the conversation going with you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. And I'll send you interesting bands to listen to if you want.
Absolutely, I will check that out. So thank you
Okay.
so, so much and have a great rest of your
Okay.
morning.